Katie Jackson is a nutritional therapy consultant, restorative wellness practitioner, certified personal trainer, and functional nutritionalist from Wisconsin. I am excited to speak with Katie today because she has a special story and a mission, one that is steeped in her passion for empowering parents with that sought after combination of knowledge and hope. Besides the titles we mentioned earlier, perhaps the greatest doesn't come with fancy credentials. Katie is the mother of 4 teenagers, one of whom suffered a brain injury as an infant, resulting in cerebral palsy. Through her daughter's journey, she has seen firsthand what whole food, nutrition, and the root cause approach wellness can do to bring innate healing to the body. Katie's story is a great example of why we do what we do. And she has a lot to share, both as a parent and a practitioner. Let's get started. You emailed us after hearing one of our podcast episodes with Beth Lambert.
From
Epidemic Answers. And you shared your own story with your daughter, Anya. And to begin, can you share her story and your story with our listeners?
Sure. Yeah. So Anya is now 15 years old, and she was diagnosed at 3 years old with cerebral palsy. But what led us on this journey was she is the third. I have 4 kids. She's the third. I have 2 boys. At that time, they were 3 and 13 months. And perfect, healthy, everything was going great. My pregnancies were healthy. I was really big into health and fitness. I had some jobs prior to being pregnant with the kids where I worked in a health and food fitness study, and I was big into nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
But I will also preface that saying it was like in the 90s when fat free was, popular and all that. So looking back, how great was my nutrition? I don't know, but I was aware of nutrition. I was aware of, keeping my body active while I was pregnant. And so, it came to 38 weeks, and it just so happened that we were out in Colorado. My husband and I are from Wisconsin. We were out in Colorado, and Pete's parents said that they could come out at 38 weeks and watch the boys. And we kind of said, that's great. We could induce, I was scheduled around that time. In hindsight, I would have never been induced. I would have let nature take its course, but I didn't know any better. I didn't think anything differently. We finally had help for the boys. Why not take them up on that,
Mm-hmm.
So we had her at 38 weeks. I went in. Everything was normal. That morning progressed, and I started to have contractions, and throughout the day, things progressed. About 5:30 at night, I had her within 2 pushes. There wasn't any problem during the pregnancy. There was, she scored 10 out of 10 on her APGAR. In our minds, she was perfect. She was healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to go breastfeed her the very first feeding, and she was very uncoordinated with her suck swallow. And I didn't notice that, but this is what I was told from the nurses, right? At that time, you're just kind of like, she's not latching on. She didn't want, I have 2 other boys that have done this. And they were like, you know what? You're really tired. Why don't we take her to the NICU tonight? You get some rest. And my other 2 boys, I was like, no, they're staying in here with me. But by the third, I was like, great, we'll probably even be released tomorrow. I'm going to take this up and get a full night's sleep, And so the next morning they came and got me at about 5, and they said, we'd like you to come to the NICU and try breastfeeding her down there. Throughout the night, when we gave her a bottle, we saw a little bit of a dusky blue around her lips. So we don't think her coordination is down. No big red flags, not to the point where they scared me quite yet. I went down there so they could monitor her with a pulse ox, and they were like, see how she's getting a little lighter blue. I got to tell you, at that time, I just wasn't in tune to it. I'm like, I don't see anything, but I could see the numbers drop a little bit. Like she would go down to 96 or something. And so that all of a sudden caused a little bit of, hey, there might be something wrong here. She may just not have a coordinated suck swallow. Let's put an NG tube down her. Now, she wasn't even 24 hours old. And in hindsight, I would have done things differently, but I thought, okay, they know what they're doing. We put an NG tube down her, and it seemed really odd, but within a couple hours, there seemed to be a series of tests. Well, now they thought she was having really severe reflux. And this was a Monday, and I got like the 3 days after were just a blur. And before I knew it, she was scheduled for a Nissen on Friday afternoon, which now that I know is unheard of. So a Nissen is where they take part of the esophagus and they wrap it around the stomach. So it makes that sphincter a little bit tighter, and secretions and food can't come back up the esophagus. So they thought that she just needed the surgery. Her reflux was that bad. And really, by the end of the weekend, everything would be fine. She would probably be even coming home, that following Monday. So we went into surgery, and it happened to be on Memorial Day weekend. And prior to that, everybody's telling me this surgeon that you have that is doing this procedure is amazing. He's probably the best, the best in the United States, blah, 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 blah. Well, it came to meeting the surgeon, and they're like, oh, that surgeon you thought you were going to have is out for Memorial Day weekend, but we have this one. And so, there was just a lot of red flags, because right away I said to him, how many of these procedures have you performed? And I'm thinking like last week, or maybe even today, or, because he was like, I just want you to know I've done quite a bit of this. And so I said, how many have you done? He said, I did 3 last year. And my heart just sunk, and my husband, we were holding on to hands, and I was like white as a ghost. And it was mom's intuition, and probably anybody else's, like, take your baby and wait for a while, make sure this is what you need. But I didn't know any better. I had no idea. I mean, my kids only did well check visits. I didn't know what my role as a mom when your baby's in the hospital. I didn't know that I could refuse surgery or say, let's just wait, or wait until the next surgeon. So we went through it, and I felt like I did not feel great about it. And she came, so that was Saturday afternoon. She had progressed. She went through the surgery. Everything did go fine. But as we were in the NICU waiting for her to heal, like I said, it was Saturday. They kind of said it was Memorial Day weekend. Probably by Monday we would be released. She just needed a couple hours to get the feeding down after this big surgery. And it was Saturday evening. It was a NICU that I could not stay in with her, because it was a really big one down in Denver, Colorado. And we stepped out to go have lunch with my boys. And when we came back in to kind of say goodnight to her for the day, she was blue as can be, needing air, and her nurse's back was turned against her, and monitors were going off. And I ran out of the room at that time because I thought she was dead. And I just heard, and I just heard my husband screaming for a doctor. And at that moment, I probably blacked out a little bit. And needless to say, I came back in. They were able to they didn't have to recess. They kind of propped her up, got her breathing again. And we did a little brainstorming, and the nurse had said, that little stinker did it again. And we're like, what are you talking about? She said, when you were out with your boys having lunch, she did something very similar. And I was thinking, well, why, when her monitors were going off, why weren't you more on top of it? And it did, after a couple of days of being in the NICU, a lot of the times the nurses were like, we just become so attuned to hearing those bells, those pulse oxes go off, that we stop to really think and register it. And I saw that because this was a very big NICU, and I felt like the whole time after this injury, my husband and I were really on high alert for all the other babies around, because it was a NICU that catered to a lot of surrounding areas, so a lot of parents couldn't be there. And I could see how that would easily happen, because you become so used to hearing the monitors. But eventually that Saturday, they said, go home. My husband said, should we intubate her? There's something that's going on that's bothering that airway. Should we intubate her so we feel okay sleeping? And they reassured us, no, we're fine. We'll keep an eye on her. We got halfway home because we live in Boulder at the time. And they called us and they said, she did it again. She stopped breathing. This time it was worse. We had to re-intubate her. And it was really from that day on that the whole like nightmare essentially started. And it was kind of a whirlwind for that week after. They were very quick they quickly did a brain MRI like the following morning, which at that time, the brain is still kind of like a sack of water, so you don't see too much. They were quick to just place a G-tube down her and said, she just needs to go home. She's got ICU shock is what they called it. She will be just fine. And I mean, it rocked our world. It was within a week. We had now brought home a daughter with a G-tube, with 2 young boys, with no diagnosis, with no understanding why that happened. And then the test just started. It was, well, there's got to be a genetic makeup to this. And really it was weeks following that I brought her into the pediatrician saying, things are not right. She's not developing like my other boys. She just had a huge surgery. Don't wait about it. Give it a couple more months. And I'm thinking months, our kids, when they're babies, progress week by week by week. And at that time I remember she was like, I don't know, maybe 5 months old. And they said the next appointment that we can get with neurology is at 9 months old. And I was just like, that's like 3.5 months from now. A kid by 9 months should be doing something completely different than Anya at 3 months, And so I feel like we got lost in the shuffle just because we didn't leave the hospital with a diagnosis. So we didn't get appropriately assigned with, like a healthcare worker that would look at our situation and plug us into the right people, right? If they knew, or at least said she's got a brain injury from what just happened, most likely, it could follow into cerebral palsy or something. We should get you hooked up with this. We should get you hooked up with that. But I felt like we didn't have that diagnosis. We fell through the cracks. And what happened was I was making cold calls to the neurologist. At that time, her sodium potassium looked really crazy. Her platelets got really crazy. And I'm making like cold calls to the endocrinologist and to, like I said, the neurologist. And when a mom's calling, you get last on the list, but if a doctor is referring you, they're going to see you a lot quicker. So it was just a whirlwind, I will say. It was a whirlwind from the day we took her home at about 8 days and was just trying to find our way and not knowing a plan, not knowing what she had, not knowing, is this really ICU shock and what they
that's all they said to you. They didn't say she has a brain injury.
No, at that time they were not thinking that what happened on that Saturday after her surgery had anything to do with it. Because I came back and I was like, I need to know how long she was without oxygen. And they say, oh, we don't have any records of that. And so I just felt, and they really shooed us away. Like they totally changed they were like really sweet, to us leading up into that. And then that moment happened and it was just like, how can we get this couple out of here?
Lawsuit waiting to happen.
Yeah.
So hold on. They did an MRI.
They did an MRI about not even 24 hours after the hypoxic event. It showed nothing. I mean, I've even gone back on her records, later in life, and it showed nothing.
Well, I'm wondering too, I was in shock when my son had his initial injury, and I don't remember, I know they did a CAT scan too of his head, but I know that he was the same age and they could see.
Okay.
And they showed it to us
Okay.
They showed it. This is like 40% of the brain was just damaged.
Yeah, there was nothing that showed up until she was about 3 years old. So we didn't get a diagnosis until she was 3. We went through we thought it was, first we did a whole genetic workup. Then we got, maybe it's a mitochondrial disorder. So we did the whole muscle biopsy when she was about 2. It wasn't until we got out of Colorado and Denver, and I'm not at all like saying that it was just that they were very tunnel vision. And I don't know if it was because kind of our story was a mess, or if it was because they were really this confused, but they were like saying this might be actually like the Anya disease. We can't figure her out. And I'm like, how can we saw a hypoxic event happen? And it was not until we came to Wisconsin, because my husband and I and our family are from here. And we had like somebody who really wasn't invested, didn't know Anya's story. He did an MRI and he was like, the cerebellum is atrophied. That is what I can see. I think there was periventricular leukomalacia, which is essentially a brain injury. And he's like, that is what happened. Has she regressed at all in her skills? And I'm like, no, because we hardly have any skills to regress, right? He's like, yeah, it's not, and we had, by then the muscle biopsy came back that it wasn't mitochondrial, but in every genetic thing came back. And it was like, for us, it was so obvious. I mean, it was definitely a brain injury, but it wasn't until, like I said, she was just 3 years old. And in Colorado, you have up until 3 years after the injury to press charges. And to be honest, it would have taken a lot of energy and time and expense, and we just didn't have it at the time. And so we just thought, what's done is done. And now we at least have a diagnosis, because everything depends on your diagnosis code of what you get for services for birth to 3, for any of those early childhood development interaction. Yeah. And so it was, so at 3 years old, we got that diagnosis. Now, by the time we got the diagnosis, it really wasn't like, we weren't surprised. My husband and I weren't surprised, because what we had done in that 3 years, we tried every single thing that we possibly could with her. Like, I don't think it would have, like, we didn't feel cheated. Like, had we known that, we would have tried this modality. By the time she was like 6 months old, I had found the Institute for Human Performance. So we started doing some of the movement, patterning that they show. We started doing energy work right away, but we also did a lot of, any of the regular care, obviously, the regular care that you would take with a baby. That's
the state paid for care.
Yes. Yeah. Right. And so I will say around 3 months old, then she started having this really odd symptom where she was vomiting every 7 days, and we could not figure out what it was. And so it would land us in the hospital every 7 days. She would start vomiting for 24 hours. We would take her in. My husband would stay with her. She would get IV fluids. She would come back home, and we would start it all over again. So needless to say, when she turned 1, she was like 12 pounds. Like, she was just off the charts small, and they could not figure out what was wrong with her. So at that point, they thought she had cyclical vomiting syndrome, which does kind of go along with a mitochondrial disorder. Throughout her, I know I'm skipping ahead, but she's had multiple surgeries on her GI tract. And what happened was, finally, by the time she was like 2, 3, a lot of things happened around 3, they were able to see that it wasn't cyclical vomiting syndrome. It was that she had a hiatal hernia. She would vomit. It would go down again. She would be able to have food for 5 or 6 days, and then that hernia would come back up, and it just looked like it was cyclical vomiting syndrome. But I don't know if you know what CVS is. It's something where you have more like anxiety, and like, I'm like, she's not cognitively aware to know that she's stressed out. And it's usually like kids that feel anxious or whatever, or a migraine within the stomach. So she had a lot of different things going on with her that caused her to not be able to bring in calories, to reject a lot of her food, to not put on weight, she looked rough. Around 1 year old, she was tiny. She was white as a ghost. There's no pinkness. There was just lethargy. And she didn't know how to self-soothe. And so she didn't know how to calm that nervous system down. She was in sympathetic mode all the time. And we would be up for hours and hours and hours on end. Days, I should say days. We had it to the point where my husband and I would tag team, and we were just getting by, because then the boys would wake up in the morning after us not sleeping, and they wanted to have a normal life too, which we were really good at providing for them. But that first year was really challenging for us.
What therapies did you do in the first year?
So we did like the Institute for Human Potential, but we didn't go out there. We just did more like, it was more like you bought some of the books and we did like the crawling. We tried to, we didn't get much with her out of that. Let me see. We did a lot of chiropractic care. We did actually like the float tank with her. We did myofascial. We did Reiki. We did some acupuncture. And then cranial sacral. And
you were doing PT and OT at the same time in that first year?
We didn't get services until she was probably about a year old.
God bless you. You didn't. It sounds like you guys really healed, I suppose, and moved on from any anger that could have come from that situation.
Well, so it's funny because my mom is a physical therapist for birth to 3 and so I had help. At least, she would look at Anya. Now, she was in Wisconsin, I was in Colorado, and she would be like talking in terms of a therapist. And I was like, okay, so she gave me stretches of perception to do and little things to try with Anya. So I became her therapist because my mom was a physical therapist for years for special needs kids. And so I kind of had that help. But other than that, it was a lot of me just digging and wondering, where am I supposed to go from here? So,
okay, so you mentioned that dietitians were opposed to your idea of changing what you fed Anya.
Yeah. So I will say about 1 year, she was about 1 year old, 12 to 13 months. And, I had come to them and I had said that I can't do much. There's not much that we can do. She wasn't on medications for a little bit. She was on seizure meds and she was just kind of like out of it. And so I took her off of the seizure meds,
Can I interject?
Yeah.
Why was she on seizure medication?
So that's an interesting story. When she was about 4 or 5 months, I brought her to the pediatrician and I said, I don't know if she had a seizure, but she did something that I've never seen, some type of movement. And, I really am sorry that I ever said seizure and put that into their mouth, because they took that, and almost to this day still, there are records that says she has a seizure disorder, and it was me. But the thing is, she at that age had chorea, so it's a movement disorder, which I didn't know is very common. Like many people with cerebral palsy can have ataxia, they can have chorea. It's these kind of spasticity movements. And it was the first that I had ever seen. I just knew, and now that I know better, she had so much GI distress that she was constantly doing weird movements. And I didn't know. I just said something's not right. And
they just put a prescription on it.
Well, we did do an EEG. We did an
Oh.
EEG, and it did come back and it said it's not, we don't see seizures, but it's definitely not normal. There's a lot of
so then they put a prescription
noise,
on it.
yes, in the background, a lot of noise in the background. And so that was about 9 months old. And I was like, okay, you know, again, I didn't, the bottom line is we need to be the biggest advocates for our kid. And we kind of have to like go against of like asking them why, because in the beginning I was like, okay. And I did it. And she was on it for probably only a month because she was already kind of out of it and not responding, but this took her to a whole nother level. She was nowhere in her body, you know, she was just, and I thought this is no life for her. She's just a shell right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, we're going off of this medicine. And I will never forget the day they said, do you know that you could really do some harm if you take her off of this, because she could have a seizure and do even more brain damage. And I said, I'm willing to take that because she's not living right now.
They never even saw her have a seizure.
Correct. They never saw her have a seizure, and it never showed up on the EEG. Like I said, it was my own doing that I mentioned that word.
Yeah, no, I hear a lot in your speaking that, I mean, you are so gracious and gentle with yourself, but at the same time, there's so much weight on your shoulders from, I didn't know, maybe we did something wrong. Just, I used to have this coach and business coach, and she said, the way that the world occurs to someone or a situation occurs to someone, exactly what falls out of someone's mouth is what the way a situation occurs to them. And even though you don't say it out loud, you've said multiple things that occur, make it sound like it occurs to you, like some things are on your shoulders.
Yes. Yeah, I will say that this has been a learning experience. And definitely the first couple of years of her life, I was stuck in, we got to fix this because on May 22nd, my life stopped, my dream stopped. I wanted my baby girl. And I wasn't willing to just be like, nope, this is our new life. It was hard. My husband is very sensitive, very, you know, he's more like laid back, more nonchalant. And I am like, let's do this. This is what's going to happen. And this is how we're going to see the outcome, you know?
Yeah.
And it took many years for me to be like, Katie, this was not the dream, but this is a good dream. This is the way that it needed to happen because it softened my heart. It softened my need of control. And to be honest, you know, in the beginning, you always hear, you know, God only gives you what you can handle, or thank God it's you and not me, and all the things that are kind of cliche. And I would always,
like the worst thing. I was thinking for a second, have I ever heard that last one? Thank God it's you and not me. And I was like, that's actually kind of mean. But then I thought, you know what? People have said that, and they word it in a way that says, you're so much stronger than me. Thank God it's you and not me.
Me, because I couldn't have handled it, is essentially what they mean. And I get it, but I'm like, do you think I was equipped to handle this? No, I was not, you know.
Yeah. I know people mean well, but
yeah.
And we have to teach people what they should say.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? I have found that because even through the years, I still get adults that are a lot more awkward, and man, these kids are just so loving. This is such a different day and age where I love the kids that are like, why is she eating like that? I'm like, that's a great question. Come over here. I'll show you how this works. And they're just like, that's good. And the mom or dad is like, don't you dare ask that question. I'm like, they just want to understand. And, you know, to be honest, I'd rather these little kids come and understand it. And the next time they see a kid with a G-tube, they'll be like, oh, that's where the food goes, you know?
Like, obviously.
Yeah, you know? And so, yeah, I had to learn a lot along the 15 years. And to be honest, I'm still I'm still
always,
learning,
you will always will, because you're all going to grow up together.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
even with your boys, you don't know what's coming with them
Right.
in each new year of adolescence and into their adulthood.
I will say that I used to be very stuck in the I have to remember her story. And that's even like sharing her story with you. I'm like, gosh, I'm kind of forgetting some things. But had you asked me a year ago, I've changed a lot even in 6 months. Had you asked me a year ago to be on a podcast, I would have probably known the dates. I would have known the time. I would have known everything, because I didn't let myself go too long without rehearsing her story over and over and over, because I thought that was doing a service to Anya. I thought if I knew everything that has happened in the last 15 years, like I've been there for it all. And it was literally last December, 2020, that I woke up and I thought, I am living in guilt and frustration and sadness because I am rehearsing her story every couple days, even a couple times a month. Well, it used to be every day, but I thought she does not want me stuck down in that like low vibrational energy, because Anya is the highest frequency energy. She is just pure light. And I thought, why am I doing this? Why am I reliving this story? This isn't serving anything. And it was really, now it's been 6 months and the details of her whole story are really just kind of falling to the side because I've stopped concentrating on it. And the more that I've done that and worked on it, the more I've become even more in love with her, because I'm not feeling the guilt and the shame and the frustration and the sadness. I just feel like, and I am working with somebody right now, like that does more energy work. And she's like, man, the shift that I've seen. And I said, yeah, I thought that's what I was supposed to do. Like, I thought I was supposed to be able to relive this story for 15 years.
A traumatic event.
Yeah.
That's what it is. You're just reliving this. Now it is her story, but it was a traumatic event for her and you.
Yeah.
And I don't know you kind of need to integrate that.
Yes. Yeah.
So
it wasn't healthy for me because it just kept up those feelings that are just so low energy. And like I said, it's to the point where I absolutely am in love with her more and more every day. And instead of like trying to fix, I'm so happy where we're at, but that does not mean that I've stopped. Like, I'm still looking into new things. I'm like, I want to try this, because if I can get even your spasticity a little bit lower, that will make your circulation in your legs feel better. And, so it didn't allow me to say, okay, then I just don't even need to try any new things, but it gave me the grace of being like, it is what it is, and it is absolutely perfect. So, yeah.
That's beautiful.
Oh, thank
you.
It
is. Yeah, I hadn't really thought of that particular thing about forgetting a story, but I had this story and I think I lived in it like a traumatic thing for a while. And eventually, as I healed, I forgot things. And the only thing that makes me sad sometimes is that I forget too much, and I don't want to get to the end of my life and my son is no longer with me. I don't want to get to the end of my life and not remember. But I don't think I need to remember every detail. But I think sometimes as an opposite thought that I have is kind of feel guilty that I don't remember certain details because I'm like, they're slipping away from me.
Sure. I can see that. See that fine balance.
Yeah. I guess it helps to write it down and then in a journal or something, and then it's there. And if you ever need to revisit it.
Yeah. My husband was really good for the first several years. He had a babyanya.org, and he really journaled quite a bit on there, and we no longer have it, but he's got it on his computer, and it is really nice if I ever needed to look back at something and just kind of, he was telling it more as a story, not like today she had this surgery, tomorrow, it was definitely a story of like what we were feeling.
A journal.
Yeah. And I'm grateful that he did that, because I was just so focused on the daily tasks and what needed to get done in order to keep moving forward with our life, because I felt like I was stuck. I was stuck in that day, and I was like, I want to get her healthy so we can now all be a family. Well, it was 5 at that time, but I was like, I really was like almost to the point where I didn't want to go on family vacations. I didn't want to do much because I didn't want to have any experiences without Anya being able to recall those or share those experiences, right? And so it was really hard to go on those family vacations and just kind of be like, well, we lived out in Colorado, so we do a lot of things in the mountains. And, Pete would be outside sledding with the boys, and I'd be in the house with Anya, just feeding her. And I was almost like, how dare they go out sledding without Anya, and so she can have this day too. I wanted to put my whole life on hold and have her catch up. And thank God I finally realized that that's just not the way that it works, especially not only for her, but for our marriage and for the boys. I would have never been able then to forgive myself looking back, like we didn't give them any experiences, and I can say right now that they've gotten a lot of experiences. Travel is probably the hardest thing because they'll be like comparing themselves to friends, but we really gave them quite a bit of experiences, as well as Anya. I mean, if there was a water slide, if there was a tubing hill, if there was a kayaking moment, my husband's taking her on a jet ski. I mean, he's done it all because he's like, she's got to experience this, And so we really have given her as much as we possibly can. So, yeah.
I love that. That's fun.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have to circle back to nutrition because that's your passion. And we detoured on the seizures.
Yes.
So you got some pushback when you said to your team of healthcare providers that you wanted to change her nutrition?
Correct. So I will say, probably around the 9-month mark, we were seeing a chiropractor / like Reiki healer, and also worked with supplements. And she was like, Anya doesn't like this food. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, I can tell Anya doesn't like this food because she's not digesting it well. She wasn't going to the bathroom. Like I said, she was pale. She was failure to thrive.
Was it a G tube or?
Yes. Yeah.
Anya had a G tube. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Anya had a G tube already on like the 8th day. They placed the G tube, and that was really like our ticket out of the hospital.
Okay.
And so, so the chiropractor kind of recommended a powder nutrition supplement, and I don't know how much I can name names, but it was something that kind of had all inclusive. It was your multivitamin, blah, 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 blah. And once we put her on that, it was gluten and casein free. And so I slowly started to give her some of that powder, and she did really well with it. I would notice when I went to go invent her, which means like, well, whatever, I could see how much she was digesting. That's the nice thing about having a G2 kid, is exactly like how fast they're getting their food, if they're digesting it. I could see a lot of that. And she just seemed to be tolerating it. At that time, she was in a lot of pain, a lot of GI pain. Like I was saying, she wasn't able to self-soothe, and I think it was coming from her gut. And about that time is really when I started to get familiar with autism. I don't know how long autism but I picked up a book that was autism, allergies, asthma, and ADD. And it was all about really helping these kiddos out from biochemistry standpoint of like giving them their B vitamins, giving them probiotics, the gut brain axis, fish oil, a book that was like geared towards a lot of what these kids are struggling with. And I was like, I know she doesn't have ADHD, and I know she doesn't have allergies. She had eczema really bad, but I'm like, this is amazing that through biochemistry, they are able to change the function of some of these the kids' brains through helping their neurotransmitters or, you know, getting detoxified. And so I dove in deep with nutrition and the biochemistry piece of it. And about age, so I had continued to give her this powdered supplement, and about age 12 months to 13 months, when I knew that kids were starting to experiment with food, like neurotypical kids were starting to have food, I thought, there's not much that I can do with Anya. There's not much. She was very, like I said, in a lot of pain. She, besides driving her to her appointments that we had, I thought the one thing that I have control over is what I put in her food, or what I give her for her food, put in her belly, essentially. And so I went and got a Vitamixer. I remember I clearly went and got a Vitamixer, went and got a bunch of like organic fruits and vegetables and meat. And I started blenderizing her food. At that time, I was not as concerned about like the RDA, her macros, micros, because I was just going to see, I was just testing it to see first, can I get it through this tube, blah, 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 blah. But the changes that I saw within 1 week of putting her on whole foods diet and blending it myself was really miraculous. I saw her finally have a bowel movement for the first time on her own. I started to see pink cheeks come by. You know, she finally had like some rosiness in her skin. I saw the sleeping got better. The amount of pain that she seemed, because she doesn't really seem to have a movement disorder per se now. It could have just been that she was just her gut was so inflamed that she wanted to be out of her skin, essentially. Totally. But we saw just these beautiful changes. And so, you know, and eventually I was starting to see the eczema go away. And the more that I read books, I would start adding more fish oil. I would start adding a couple things that, you know, made sense in Anya's picture, probiotics. And I did go to the doctor and I said, look, we've been experimenting and she seems to be doing really well. Would you be able to help me? At that time, I had the book, The Homemade Blenderized Diet. It's like the only one that I think they still have that's like a spiral form. It's really old, but and I was following some of the recipes that they have in this book for blenderized diet. And the nutritionist, she said, why would you want to do that? We have perfectly good food. You know, she's showing me the Pediasure can. And it's all, she's like, she's just too young to be switching this food out. And why would you want to do that? Because that's a lot of work and it's a lot of time. And I said, if you aren't going to help me with this, I'm going to do it on my own, you know? And she really would not, like, she was like, you can do whatever because she's your baby, but we would advise you to stick. She said, she is severely underweight. And I said, she's severely underweight because she's throwing up everything. Like her body is rejecting. At the time, I didn't know that it was this hiatal hernia but you know, I said, I can get so much better I only have like 5 days to get nutrition in Anya before she throws up for 2 days. Right. So I'm like, I want the very best foods. I'm like, this has corn syrup solids in it. This has hydrogenated oils. You know, I started to learn my labels and they were like, so what? And I'm like, what about the gut? You know, and I'm like, she has a brain injury. I'm like teaching them and they're just like, So it really made me just go down this whole avenue of feeding her what I thought, you know, I will say this is now like 15 months. I didn't get into the GI specialist like right away the day that I started making her whole foods diet. You know, I'm like, a neurotypical kid would be eating this, you know, why can't I just blenderize it for you? And with your help, we could make sure that she's getting enough and enough water and stuff. But they really did not want to do it. And I will tell you that I just had a consult 2 weeks ago with another little girl and her mom wants to change her and she's 18 months and they are I thought maybe this was just because it was 15 years ago. She said, they will not work with me right now. They say she is way too young to be put on a blenderized diet. And I'm like, That's crazy. You know, we don't go to the doctor with our 18-month-old and say, can we start giving them real food? You know, I mean, as a mom, we have that tuition of what we start them off on or whatever. And I was like, how can you say, and especially it makes me so frustrated that the two special populations, geriatrics and special needs children developing or going through any type of surgery, they need the most nutrient dense food, and they are the ones that are getting this junk food, and it
is junk food.
My heart.
Well, look what they feed people in hospitals.
Yeah. And every time we go to a hospital, we really only go now when Anya's got surgeries, but the nurses will say, oh my gosh, the way she is responding, like already, you know, a couple hours after surgery, or she just had a bowel movement and she's on narcotics and she just had a big hip surgery yesterday. We don't see kids go to the bathroom or have a bowel movement for 3 to 4 days after surgery. And that's with Miralax. And I'm like, no, like her, you know, and they're just in awe. And then they're also like, and the smell of her food that smells like real whole food compared to you open it up with these corn
and the smell of her poop.
Yeah.
Because exactly. It's not supposed to stink to high hell.
we get so many compliments from the nurses are like, this is pretty special. We wish more kids would be able to get on this food. And I'm like,
you wonder why they can't, because most people, if they're told, how many times you were told, you know, no, your intuition's not right. Don't do that. Don't try that.
Yeah,
I don't think so.
Yeah.
And most people will understandably just say, okay, you went to school for this and you're obviously smarter than me. So they will listen. Yeah. And that has built our whole healthcare system.
Yes. And I always tell clients that I'm like, you have the right. I'm like, we don't need to be disrespectful. When you break an arm, you're going to want to go to the doctor, right? Oh, yeah. You're going to want to go to the hospital. But because I'll see clients now that are on blood pressure medicine, then it goes to cholesterol medicine, then it goes to, you know, their pre-diabetic medicine. And I'm like, do you know that we could really help you? And they're like, but my doctor said I have to take this. And I'm like, but you could also say, can you give me like 3 or 4 months to change things around, maybe with my diet or, you know, with exercise or whatever, and like, give me some time. And it's like, it's just not even like, they don't give us an option to like say, hey, do you want to try this a different route? It really is, because I read a lot of blood chemistry now that I'm schooling to do it. And I'm like, you're like 5 points away from cholesterol medicine, essentially, is what you're going to need, you know, your point. And they're like, I know, my doctor just says in 6 months, I'll come back and we'll look at it. And I'm like, so give yourself the 6 months and do something, you know, let's turn it around. Like, let's not wait for that number to jump up 5 points and then to get on the medicine. You know, I'm like, and I think I learned that very early on after my not horrible intuition, because I had the intuition with the doctor that said, oh, he performed 3 of these surgeries last year. And I was hoping he said 3 of them this morning. You know, it really made me think when I went into the doctor for the last several years with Anya, I will listen. I will say, now, can you tell me how that works? You know, I do have the education now that to know, like, tell me the biochem, how is this affecting her chemistry, as opposed to, you know, just telling me what the label says. And then I always say, you know, there's some other things that I would like to go home. I would like to think about it. I may want to try some other things. Can we just put that on the back shelf for a while, you know? And they are usually very, okay, that makes sense, especially because I can kind of usually talk a little bit up to their level and understand some things. But even if you don't, you as a parent have the right to say, I'm going to think about that. I'm going to think about that. And I might get a second opinion. They're not used to people like asking for a second opinion, but you have the right to say, no, not right now. You don't need to leave your doctor's office with that medication. Just say, I'm going to think about that. And I think I might get a second opinion just to make sure. And then if I think that's right, I'll come back for it, you know, but I think we've lost that. We just think that they're the doctors, they went to school, and we need to say yes, because that must be the best for us. So
I don't know if we lost it. Did we lose? I'm thinking about this. Did we lose it, or did we ever have it?
Yeah.
When was the last time in history? Because I mean,
that is very true.
I guess in ancestral medicine and times. I don't know. Did it work like that? I think
yeah. So
it was
I like to give the power back to the mom or whomever I'm working with, and just say, you know, because I didn't even know that when we got to that hospital on day 5 of life, ready for that surgery, I had now found out from, it must have been a lawyer or somebody that I was talking to. They're like, because she wasn't sent to Denver Children's Hospital, which is really good. She was sent to a different hospital. And I didn't know that I had the right to say, I would like an ambulance to transfer her to Children's Hospital. Like, I didn't know I had that right. I mean, she had the time of her surgery down, and here I'm a little mom saying, no, I want her surgery to be postponed and I want to move to a different hospital. Like, I didn't know, but we have got to be the best advocates, you know, for our kids, and just keep asking questions and not worrying about what they're thinking of us. So,
man, I'm thinking about how when in time we would learn that. I feel like that should definitely be like a chapter in what to expect or something.
Yes.
Or in those baby classes, you know, if people choose, I don't think I did baby classes, but in any way that people can learn, it would be nice, because these things do happen. And if people don't have any preparation at all, even just like a couple paragraphs in a book or a chapter on it, then they're just blindsided and they have no clue.
No clue. I had no
clue. And that is the time you really need to, like, all of a sudden buck up and figure stuff out.
Yeah. We learned early on, I forgot who said this, but they said every time you go into a consult or a doctor's appointment, ask them, what is my level of concern? What should my level of concern be? Because sometimes, like the doctor that was telling me Anya could pass away if I took the seizure meds away, it was like, you know, I'd like him to be, my level of concern is if he were to say it was a 10, why would it be a 10? Her EEG didn't show this. She's never had one set. Like talk to me, you know, because if your level of concern is like, oh no, like, because she has had some scary things happen, you know, like with pneumonias and stuff, where your level of concern should probably be around a 9 or a 10. That's a pretty big deal for a baby that's aspirating, blah, 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 blah. But, you know, something else on the other hand of like me taking my little blenderized formula book and not getting the dietitian's blessing, like, what's my level of concern? That's probably like a 3.
Okay, perfect. So Katie, thank you so much for joining me here today and opening up and sharing your family's story with Anya. I understand that can be, you know, very emotional, and emotional bringing it up, but also emotion. Maybe there's certain emotions that come in. Did I forget something or not? And also I understand the fact that you may feel, in something that you just said here, you may feel that it's too long, or maybe you need to make it more concise, but it is perfect and it is your story. And, you know, each of those details was very important.
Well, thank you, Emily. I will tell you, you are the first person that I've ever sat down with. I've shared Anya's story, like bits and pieces, just like I did. I didn't, you know, draw it out. But I feel very uncomfortable, or I have felt very uncomfortable. I'm not an extrovert. I don't like drawing attention to myself. That was another thing that I really had to get over in the beginning, is because Anya is very loud with her secretions. And so every time she chokes and on her own swallow, because it doesn't go down, she retches. And so I don't know if anybody that doesn't know what that sound is, but it sounds like a person is getting ready to throw up, and it can be very overwhelming and very scary. And so I was always very cautious about going to restaurants or going to church or and my husband is very like, this is our family, this is who she is, get over it. And he had also needed to be you know, considerate of my feelings, as well as I did need to get over some of it. But I am a very quiet person, and like I said, I hate drawing attention to myself. So but clearly when you walk in with like two little boys and now I have three, but and a daughter in a wheelchair and making these loud noises, you draw a little bit of attention. And so I've had to get used to that. But you've made me feel really good opening up, sharing her story, and really the little prayer that I said prior to coming on was like, if I can just touch one person, or if I can just give hope, that that's really what I want to do with Anya's story, is to give hope that, I'm not here to heal her and make her 100% better. I don't have any like, oh, she's needing to walk, she needs to eat. But if I can just give her the best life that I can provide for her, that's what I want. And if I can give hope to those other parents who feel like overwhelmed right now. I get a lot of parents that feel overwhelmed, don't know where to start. And I always just give them like one little thing at a time. Like, hey, maybe add a little bit of, like, I love bone broth, but add a little bit of this, and maybe that might help the constipation, because we know, like, if you just help the constipation, that can change lives for people. It's like, I always like to give them little bite-sized things that they can do. And the more and more that they feel, empowered is really what I want them to feel, because there were times where I did not feel empowered. I did not feel hopeful for Anya's journey, and it was scary. And so I want to provide that for others. And just like the Brain Possible, which is why I really reached out to you. I've listened to a ton of podcasts, and I have done a lot of reading, and it was just so refreshing to be able to go to a website that had this information that I really sought out when Anya was young, and I was trying to go to this website. What did I recall on that podcast? And doing my own digging. And it was like, this is what we needed, was one resource that gives us, so many other resources and connections, and how can we learn from each other. And so I applaud what the Brain Possible is doing. And thank you so much for filling that need.
Thank you so much for saying that. It really means a lot. Sometimes it can be difficult, to be honest, to create only digital media, which is all we do. That is currently those are our programs. They're all digital. So we don't see the thousands of, sometimes it's been up to 14,000 unique users on our website a month. We don't see the people who are listening to the podcast or behind the Instagram. And it can become a little, like, am I doing this right?
Right.
Are we even making any impact? Are we touching anyone's lives?
Absolutely. I can understand that, because even when I come out with a post and I get like 2 likes, I'm like, is this worth it? Like, am I helping? And then like 3 weeks later, I'll have somebody say, I read that post and I, integrated this and I feel so much better. And I was like, oh my gosh, even one person listening, I'm so happy, And so,
that's the goal, is just, to serve the greater good and to help just one person, give one person hope, 2 people hope. And that's really where the money's at.
Yeah.
That's a paycheck, as they
say. You guys, yeah, exactly. And you guys are doing that. So thank you very much. We appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, you are too. So where can listeners find out more about you and your practice?
Sure. So right now I practice in Appleton, Wisconsin, and everything is through Zoom. And so if you go to foundational-nutrition.com, that is my website. It gives you'll see a little bit of Anya's story, but it also can connect you to, if you ever want to do a free discovery call, I chat with all of my clients 15 to 20 minutes prior to meeting. So we can be on the same page, or you see if, I fit for what they're looking for. And I'm always willing to respond back to DMs or to emails, and to try to help out as many people, especially in this population. Like I was kind of saying, I have kind of a broader population for who my clientele is right now. But if I can provide any hope or any feedback or any suggestions, I'm more than happy to do that. So foundational-nutrition.com. And I will say that I've put together a wellness guide It's free. It's over 12 pages long. It was long. It took a while for me to do it, but there's a ton of resources. It's not only for special needs kids, although I will tell you the blenderized foods that I use with Anya. I tell about the books that have really impacted Anya and what I got a lot out of. I mentioned some podcasts. I mentioned, but then I have like just even for neurotypical kids, my recommendations for probiotics, or if they go on an antibiotic, what else I would suggest, or my recipe for, for bone broth or when to use it, some constipation tips. I mean, I really do have a whole section on my wellness guide for kiddos, any type of kiddo that could really help, as well as, then I do dive into some of the testing that I do. I do a lot of stool testing, organic acids testing, hormone testing, and stuff like that. But just the free guide will give you some of those supports that you may want to look at.
And is that guide for just a general audience, or is it?
Yeah, it's a general audience. Like I said, the first 6 to 7 pages are just for my more adults. And, like I said, if you are having skin issues, I give you a little bit of what products that I've been using. I have a basic protocol. I always, my foundational 5 that I start most people at, but then also, like I said, just a whole kids section. And it does include books and reading that you can do that has been helpful. And the homemade blended formula book, if you're I don't even know where to start with homemade blended formulas, it's on there, as well as
Perfect.
the
That's
Liquid
awesome.
Hope and the Real Food Blends are the two formulas. I'm done blenderizing food for Anya. It was nice, but we now have 2 formulas that we use, that one that is meat based and one that is more vegetarian. So I just wanted her to get as many different foods as possible. She eats better than anybody in our family. So
of course. Yeah.
Awesome.
And it does help when you can control it so much.
Oh, I know. I'm
know.
lucky. I mean, I will say, my husband and I at some points were we're lucky. We've got access. We can give her anything and it doesn't need to taste good. So she's had it all and she does really well on it. And so, that's a free guide for anybody that wants it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So Katie, my last question I always like to ask, is there anything else that you would like to share with the Brain Possible community to be complete today?
That is a good one. I guess just really giving the power back to the parent. Your child, you've got those instincts. They're called motherly instincts for a reason. And listen to them. Go by the hunch, go by the feelings. And if you're getting an answer from a physician, and again, I'm not trying at all to badmouth physicians, but if you're getting the answer from the physician, no, or it's not time, or that's not possible, because I've heard a lot of that in Anya's life, that's not possible. That's never going to happen.
Hence the name.
Yes, exactly. We've heard it. We've heard it. And sometimes I look back and I'm like, gosh, did a doctor really say that? But use that intuition, use what feels good. We have kind of lost or detached from does this feel right? Go with what feels right, because you know your child the best, and you can be in charge as well as with your other physicians or whatever, but you know your child. And so listen to that voice.
Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure and an honor to speak with you today. And in some ways you helped me I've been a little bit overbooked lately, and you have helped me realize why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yes.
And I love connecting with mamas and people like you.
Well, thank you.
We appreciate you sharing all of your knowledge with us and opening up. And I know sharing your story is very personal, and it's not for everyone.
No, but this was a great place for it. I felt great. So
thank you.
So thank you, Emily.
I hope that you enjoyed our conversation today and that you learned something new. Do you have a question for Katie? Remember that Katie reached out to us to share her story after hearing one of our episodes. You can do the same. We would love to hear from you. Please let us know how we can be useful in your journey. Email us at info@thebrainpossible.com. Be sure to subscribe, follow, and share our podcast if that feels true for you. You may also consider visiting our website for more information on stories, therapies, and products that we think that you will love and will support you on your journey of healing and wellness. As always, thank you for spending your precious time with us at The Brain Possible. See you next week, and be well.